So as I just mentioned, I'm Cynthia Bouthot, and I'm the CEO and founder of Space Commerce Matters. And we're really happy to be here today with the IceCubes team talking about what these opportunities and what these facilities look like in space. Laura Gonzalez, who's our terrestrial markets and networks lead, will talk about those funding opportunities in Europe. And then, as I mentioned, we want to spend a lot of time talking or hearing from you on what you're up to. I am so happy to hear you. I can't really see you yet. So over to you. I am going to stop sharing, and we're really excited to hear from Hilda about what some of these facilities and capabilities and some of the case studies in the broad types of work that IceCubes is doing in this really exciting area. So Hilda, let's see if we can share.
All right, so thank you everybody who is online to join. So my name is Hilda Steenaert. I'm with the IceCube service, and we want to inform you the type of assets and capabilities that we have that might help you in getting some educational projects or challenges or events organized and supported. But let's start off with who are we with IceCube service. So IceCube stands for International Commercial Experiment Cube Service, and you see one in the background. And this is actually a service that we set up to fly research, to fly technology and educational projects to the International Space Station. And what we provide is fast-track regular access to space. And you see the crew member in the video actually operating our facility that we own on board the International Space Station. And we provide with that a unique real-time interaction so that you can actually have a cube or a module installed on that platform, and you can operate it from wherever you are, which is a unique feature of our facility. So you can have these cubes, as you see in blue. They can have very different shapes and sizes, and they can be installed inside the volume of our facility. We call them wired cubes. They're connected to the interface connector for power and data. But you can also think to have something installed on front of our facility. That means it's actually in the area where the crew members float around in the Columbus, the European module of the space station, and so they can access it. So if there's anything where you need access of the crew, or maybe your cube or payload that you want to fly doesn't fit nicely in the form inside our facility, you can also install it there on this bar that is called a C-track. That's a second possibility. And a third possibility that's very interesting is that we can actually also accommodate modules or cubes that connect to our facility through wireless. And this is actually another unique feature that we provide for. And I must say, so far we haven't used that. So if you would be interested in that, we definitely would be willing to talk to you to see how we can together test that for the first time. So I mentioned this unique real-time interaction capability. We think that's very needed in the 21st century, that you can send from wherever you are over internet your commands to your module and get data in less than a second turnaround. You get the data back where you are. The facility provides you with power, it provides you with data, and it can then run an automated protocol, or you can send these commands, or there can be also some manual activities if that is needed. And also the mission durations actually can be chosen according to your requirements. If you want to dig into a bit more technical aspects of the interfaces of our facility, we put a link underneath, and you will be getting those slides so that you can dig it up. But let's get a bit deeper into education, because that's what we're all here for today. And let me tell you a bit about a variety of possibilities of educational activities that we have been supporting and can support with our facility on board and with the capabilities that we have. So first thing that we have been doing that you see in the top left is educational competitions or challenges, and we do that at the different levels of education. So we support, for example, the ESA Orbit Your Thesis, which is for university students. It's now called the Petri program, and I think it will be shown later as one of the possibilities for you to find financing for your project. We also did for university students and higher level secondary students, we did an AI in space challenge, and I'll say a bit more about that later on, but as you can guess, it's related to how we can use artificial intelligence in the space environment. We also did a challenge related to coding using a mini computer. I will show it as well, and that was targeting even primary school kids. And we also set up for students and startups a global sustainability space challenge. So this is something that we like to support, this type of challenges or competition, and we provide support that can happen during the selection process, that can happen during the feasibility assessment, or to mentor some of the teams and provide workshops. If we move to the right, and I'll show a bit more details later on as well, another thing you can do is use an existing cube. I called them here cube of the shelf. So we have a number of cubes that we have ready for you to use, which allows you to focus on science. So that's one possibility. Your educational project, you want to focus on science and you want to use an available cube. Another possibility is you want to focus on engineering, then you might want to develop your own cube or module. And a third possibility is you may want to concentrate or focus on technology, and then you may again think of what could be the setup to validate or demonstrate your technology in the facility. A third possibility that I will be mentioning a bit about is interactive or inspirational events that we do with the crew on orbit. And for that, we have a media set on board that is connected to our facility. And so specifically also during the commercial missions from Axiom, we typically do a whole series of interactive events that also, a lot of them are actually educational or inspirational with kids on the ground that get to ask many questions. This can also be in the form of a lesson from space. And also, you could also think to tackle art in space or interactive art in space. So that's, let's say, a third group of possible educational activities. And then the fourth is we actually, through a partnership that we set up and that turned into a joint venture called MetaSpace, we also provide courses and workshops, for example, specifically on payload design for the International Space Station. And these courses can also be provided at your premises, for example. And we're also setting up a global network of space innovation labs. And one of those could also be at your university, if that would suit you, and that would make you part of that global network. And I'll say a bit more about that as well. So let's jump in one by one, and so that I can show a bit more. There's more on these slides that I will be talking over for the sake of time, so that we leave for some question and answer time as well. But for sure, you will be getting those slides. And if there's questions later on, for sure, you can either ask it here or contact us later. So first, let's look at these cubes off the shelf. So cubes that are ready for you to be able to use them. The first one is what we call the science cube. It's actually a relatively standard cube where you would have access to, for example, 6 of these tubes or cuvettes. In the case of the pictures, there's actually 6, but we're building the next one for a September mission that has 12 tubes, and we could imagine also to have one with 18 tubes or 24 tubes. That's a matter of extending the volume. And what can you put in those tubes? That can be fluids, that can be bacteria, can be particles, plants, even fungi. And so there's a simple Raspberry Pi that allows you to command and control. there's actually 2 cameras that allows you to look at these tubes to see what is happening with your particles or with your bacteria, and you can send commands to change the light, to even change, for example, the heating. In the mission in September, we will be providing also for temperature control, actually, for those tubes. So it's a first standard cube that can be used for any project, science project that you could want to do on board the space station. A second one is a greenhouse that we have flown a while back in a study that was done by the International Space University and NASA Ames. So this has a reservoir where plants can grow in the absence of gravity, and so there's everything that is needed to keep these plants happy. So water, there's light, a thermistor, and so on. So you can examine the growth of these seedlings in microgravity. So a second cube that is there for you to use. And a third one relates to cell biology, cell culturing. This one is under development. We plan the first mission of this BioCube in December. But so if you have a science project that is related to cell biology, this could suit you well. On the picture, you see it with based on a 6-well plate. In fact, we're finalizing the design, and we will have several possibilities based on a 6-well plate, based on a 12-well, 24-well. So there's several possibilities. But again, the environment provides for everything that is needed to keep, in this case, cells happy. So there's a temperature control at 37 degrees. It provides for media refreshment, so for the nutrients. It provides for fixation capability. It provides for 5% CO2 because cells need that. And there's cameras that are following what happens, and it can also be connected. And I'll say a bit more about that with our AI box, our artificial intelligence capability. And the fourth one in this series of cubes that you can actually use off the shelf is the protein crystallization incubator that is called Kirara. This we have been flying 5 missions so far in partnership with a Japanese company called JAMS. And it's actually very nice to use this capability also for educational purposes. And there is an associated program, educational programs, that has lectures on space missions and on crystallization. And there is also a kit, crystallization kit, that can be provided to your school or your university, and that you can use for your educational program, so that you can also test on the ground what are the best conditions before you actually have the possibility to fly your proteins or molecule samples in a real space mission. And in fact, in the last mission of Kirara, which happened about 2 months ago, December, I think, we had such an educational use case specifically from Taiwan students that actually looked at protein crystal production for drug discovery. And so associated with that were a whole series of events over a period of 6 months, and where at the end the student teams actually presented the results of their preliminary experiments and prepared samples for the actual space experiment. So these are 4 cubes that are there if you want to focus on the science in an educational project. But as I mentioned, you could also think that there might be an educational challenge or a competition that you may want to set up in your environment. And I want to show a couple of examples of what we have been supporting there. So I mentioned our artificial intelligence box. So this is based on a NVIDIA Jetson board, and it allows you to upload and run artificial intelligence that you have either trained on the ground or that you train directly on board, and you can access that by real-time commanding. You can use this AI box to link it to another cube or module or to the media set, and I'll say a bit more about that later on. And so you can imagine that there's a lot of use cases in terms of software demo and validation, but also things in the sense of classification of images, object detection, and maybe by linking it to the media set, you can also do things like facial recognition algorithms that can be applied, for example, with the crew members for scientific purposes. So I mentioned earlier, we did, I think it's about 2 years ago, we did a challenge, or we supported a challenge in Southeast Asia with a number of partners that was about AI in space. And we used our AI box and also the sensors that are built in this AI box. And I listed most of them there. There's actually even more, but there's sensors for humidity, for pressure, for temperature. There's also a Minipix TPX tree sensor that allows you to follow also with a radiation camera. And all of it is available and accessible for you to use and get the data and process the data. And so this challenge actually called for university level students to come up with ideas how to use AI in space. And in fact, the one that won, I really liked that idea. They managed to set up an AI tool that allows to predict what is called single event upsets. So these are radiation effects on computer boards, and they could actually teach their AI to detect those or predict those. Another thing, as I mentioned, related to coding is a mini computer, and this is called Calliope, Mini Calliope. It's a computer that is used in the German-speaking countries a lot for STEM activities, for easy programming, easy coding. So it's really adaptable for all ages, and it also has a number of assets installed on this mini computer, like a speaker, like light sensors, microphone, and so on. And also for that, we actually supported a competition. As I mentioned, this was for primary school kids. So they were, I think, between 10 and 12 years old. And the winning team came from Switzerland. And they actually made this ball that you see on the picture. So in this ball, this mini computer was installed, and they used the ball to actually throw, to ask the crew members to throw at this target that you see behind. To measure what is the differences between throwing such a ball in microgravity versus on the ground. You can actually watch the video. The YouTube link is there. It was actually a lot of fun to do this with Samantha Cristoforetti, actually using our own media set that I will talk about just now, because that's actually the third possibility, I would say, to use for an educational scope. So our media set allows for interactive events with the crew members. So you can use it either for live events or for recorded events. It's available on demand, and actually you can stream it into different platforms on the ground. And so you can either have people gathered in a room and use it live, or you can have the resulting event streamed on any platform like YouTube or Vimeo, actually from the streaming coming down from the space station. And so, yeah, you can use it for inspirational events, educational events. And maybe I can show a short video. We have been using it, as I mentioned, during the Axiom missions, and this is actually from the Axiom 2 mission. As you may know, there were 2 Saudi crew members on board, and I think they have done an awesome job in this emerging country as far as space is concerned, to actually do a lot of inspiration and outreach. And let me just show quickly.
I grew up wanting to be an astronaut. I was in love with the space race the moment it started. Now that I'm here, it's an awesome experience. I'm here with a fabulous, and everyone, astronauts love to play with things that can demonstrate microgravity. You love to float around.
تأكلون في محطة الفضاء. أهلين عبد الله، حياك الله. شوف جبت لك هنا نماذج للأكل اللي ناكلها، الأكلات اللي ناكلها في الفضاء. إحنا نجيبها معانا من الأرض، تكون كده مجمدة، وفي جهاز هنا في محطة الفضاء الدولية نقدر نعبي فيه موية.
My primary mission, however, is STEM school outreach, to develop an understanding and help teachers, educators, parents to understand the value of space.
بالشوق أهله كذا.
نتواصل عن طريق الإيميل، نتواصل معه يوميا، واتصلنا عليه يوميا، وقبل شيء قليل يعني تواصلت معه، أموره تمام.
So we're using that as a platform to raise awareness of all the things that are coming in future spaceflight. And that students, people around the world can be involved in many, many careers.
In one particular occasion, the controller of the ice cubes system
that provided the comm.
also on the other end, he came back on and said, "Wow, that was a really fun event."
And we also thought it was a really fun event. So they actually did quite a lot. I think in total we have now done 40, 50 of those events, and a lot, especially in the Saudi, were with many kids on the ground, some hundreds or thousands, and those kids could be asking questions. So you can imagine how inspirational that was for them to talk to Rihanna or Ali that were on board. And then the last group of activities that relate to this partnership that we have under Metaspace are related to these courses. So I mentioned that we have been doing now several times a workshop for payload design. I actually came back 2 days ago from the last one, which was in Dubai. We have been doing one in Jeddah and one in Oxford, and we will be redoing Oxford again in Oxford University in July. And these focus around payload design workshop or health from space for Earth. So there's different type of courses, and that can also be tuned or customized to what may be your need. But in addition, as I mentioned, we're also setting up this global network of space innovation labs. So this is actually infrastructure that we install on the ground that allows you to connect with this infrastructure in space and allows you basically to have a control center, to have a small engineering lab, and to establish for your own capabilities as part of the Space Innovation Lab infrastructure. As of now, we have 10 of those Space Innovation Labs initiated, but we're adding quite quickly some more. And really the goal is to expand this to a real global network. We're covering now 3 of the continents, but we would like to expand that to all of the continents for sure, so that it allows also for international collaborations, because that's really also the target. And one example that we have been doing last summer, and for which you see the video on the left, is an experiment, a kind of pilot study with the Space Innovation Labs, a collaboration between Malta, Saudi samples were on board. The UAE was involved also with their astronauts, US with Cornell University, and the UK, and then us in Belgium. In this case, it was a study on genetics and human skin microbiome samples of diabetes patients, but it can be basically around any topics where space is relevant. And we really like it if this becomes an international collaboration over different space innovation labs. And most of these space innovation labs have their own angle or a focus area. For example, the one in Oxford that we inaugurated in summer last year is specifically focused on aging, for example, but there's others that are looking at other topics. And so this is really open for people when they want to have a space innovation lab installed. We can do that, and that makes you part of this setup of the global network. And so these are, let's say, the 4 possibilities. I have some more slides of things that we have been flying in the past, but I suggest actually that I pass it back to you and just maybe summarize with, again, showing those 4 areas of challenges, competition, cubes that you can fly or develop, media set events, and then courses and space innovation labs. And with that, I'll pass it back to you. And if somebody is interested to see a bit more on what we have launched in the past, we can get back to those slides, Cindy. So back to you.
Thanks, okay. Hilda. And I have to say, during my time at the International Space Station National Lab, a big part of our mission was to inspire the next generation with STEM education projects. Well, Hilda, you just blew me away as the old generation, being blown away by really inspiring work that you're all doing. So hopefully as we go through the question and answer and discussion period, we can hear more about your case studies because they're really, really impressive. All right, so you're welcome. So now on to, let's make sure I've got the right slide back up. All right, am I back on ice cubes with Hilda, Laura? Do you see that slide?
Yeah, I can start sharing. Can you
Okay.
see the screen?
And so now I'd like to introduce Laura Gonzalez, who's the Terrestrial Markets and Network Lead for Space Commerce Matters. And we're going to go over a few of the funding opportunities that we are aware of that could support some of this activity. Again, this is not an exhaustive list, and we hope to learn more from you as the experts in education and some of these STEM areas to see, what are we missing and how can we look more holistically at the ability to fund. So over to you, Laura.
Thank you very much, Cindy, and thank you, Hilde. That was great. It was great to hear about all these capabilities and all these great educational projects. It's amazing. So let's see if we can find some ways to offering this to all the people that are here with us today. So these are, as Cindy was mentioning, are some of the funding programs that we have found in Europe, but we really encourage all of the participants here to reach out to us as well and let us know about your specific areas and focus and activities, because we might be able to tap into other sectors or other type of funding that is not exactly space or is not currently here in the screen. The first one that we want to mention is the Erasmus Plus. This is one of the funding programs of Horizon that we think is very relevant to education programs, and it could be great for education, training, and youth. So we think that this could be a very good option. There's different calls at different times of the year, so we really encourage you to go to the link and find exactly some of these calls. Also within the Horizon program, there's now a call that actually finishes in September this year. That is this Interconnected Innovation Ecosystems call. And this is linked to improving that connection between research institutions, universities, but also other academia and industry. So we think it could be a very good option, especially to these areas that Hilde was mentioning before about this global network and these space innovation labs. We think there could be some links there. So if you're thinking of establishing any collaboration of this kind, this could be something that we could explore together. Another option that we found is the INDUSAC. This is a program to establish collaborations again between industry and academia, and this is to create these co-creation teams that will receive some minimum funding to do some activities regarding STEM and education. So this is again something that we can explore together, and the due date is the 7th of March. There's also the AFCEA European STEM grants program that again is not a lot of budget, but we think it could be interesting to establish a first partnership or start exploring ideas together. And this is again to support science, technology, engineering, so STEM for students and teachers, and the projects are funded in a year-by-year basis, and there's no due date for this, it's more in a rolling basis. And finally, this Copernicus opportunity that we have found, we know is not exactly related with the IceCubes facility, but we see it as a very interesting model for other STEM inter-university initiatives. So it's a mechanism in which Copernicus tries to empower the next generation of engineers and scientists with suitable skills to use this data from the Copernicus for Earth observation. And we believe they could be established new programs that are similar to this and could be very beneficial to study microgravity and do lots of different fields from biology to aging in space. Moving on to some other funding programs, in this case by ESA, we have grouped them in this slide. And the first one that you can see is the one that Hilde was mentioning before, is the ESA Academy Experiments or Petri. And in this one, there's a few different opportunities. At the moment, the last round closed on the 3rd of December of 2023, but we believe this can now open again so we would encourage you to keep your eyes open, and if you're interested, reach out to us and we will let you know when this opens again. The project duration for this project is 1.5 years, and for the work to be done with ice cubes on the facility, they request a team to be at least of 6 students, and one of them needs to be it's recommended for him to be a PhD student because it needs to be enrolled for more than 2 years in this program. So here there's opportunities like the fly, orbit your thesis, and other opportunities. Another interesting call from the European Space Agency is the OSIP, the Open Space Innovation Platform. This one is probably more research focused instead of educational, but we think is also relevant. And so with this OSIP opportunity, you can have some co-founded research for a PhD or a postdoctoral student up to 175,000. And these are the two main ones that we have identified that are currently opened. There's also a very interesting website that we've put the link there, so you can check there for any training courses, opportunities, and competitions and challenges for students that we think are very interesting. These two organizations, ELGRA and CELGRA, are not necessarily funding organizations, but we think they're interesting for you to explore if you're working in this microgravity area. The ELGRA is the European Low Gravity Association, so it's a non-for-profit organization, and they organize symposiums and events in which you can get to meet other interesting people that are working in this area. And the next call is the next symposium is going to be in September in the UK, and you can find in these links the registration to submit abstracts, and also we'll open registrations in March. There's also an opportunity to get some funding for research through ELGRA for ELGRA member states, and the deadline for this is the 15th of March. So if you're a member or you want to become a member of the organization, this is an interesting opportunity. And they also have a student chapter for this ELGRA, for the European Lower Gravity Association. And finally, we didn't want to leave today without having a little bit of a show of what are the research funding programs that we currently have also. So these are not so much educational based, but if you're doing some research in the microgravity area, these are funding programs that could potentially be interesting for you. So we have divided them in different countries. So the first one is the one for the Portuguese Space Agency, and this is for research organizations and universities in Portugal. It's called the PROSECO, and is aimed to support science on board the ISS. So, for example, you could be using the Ice Cubes facility and trying to support this science in this area. Then we have the German, for Germany, we have a very interesting call that actually opens today, the 15th of February, that is called the InnoSpace Masters. And they actually mention specifically tissue engineering or development of modern materials or pharmaceutical agents in microgravity. So if you're doing any work in this area, we think it could be very, very useful and very interesting for you. And then for the UK, we have found two different opportunities. The first one is regarding healthcare, for new healthcare interventions and medical devices. And the second one is for a collaboration between the UK and Japan. And this could be used for the service that Hilde mentioned before, Kirara, for protein crystallization. And we think it could be very interesting to have a collaboration there with Japan and the Kirara service. So that's it regarding the funding.
Thank you, Laura. And so now what we'd like to do, as we talked about at the beginning, is hear from you. And we have a few questions in the chat, and I forgot to mention at the very beginning of this, if you do have questions, as we were talking, feel free to put them in the chat. But now we also have the opportunity to open mics. If you raise your hand, we will unmute you, and we'd love to understand what you're focusing on. What are your project concepts, as well as are there educational grants and STEM type programs that you're currently working in that may just be terrestrial, and let's see if we can quote unquote flyblies them and come up with innovative ways of looking at how we can bring all of the pieces together, your creative ideas, the incredible platforms and services that IceCubes has, and the ability to do that. So as Jose just put into the chat, please raise your hand to share what you're working on or talk about a question or a comment. And Laura, why don't we stop sharing so that we can hopefully see folks as they start to ask these questions. The first question that I see in the chat is, are these provided for European only? And I believe, Tanya, you have an answer for that. So can you unmute, Tanya?
Sure. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, thanks for the question. So it depends on the program, depends on the country, of course. Some programs do allow a certain associated countries, it's like a specific list of countries to participate in the program. And then I know in general, the Horizon Grant programs, funding mechanisms do allow foreign organization or foreign researcher participation, if it can be justed. One of the opportunities we highlighted focuses on really regional ecosystems. So it'd probably be important for that particular grant for the country to be sort of adjacent or nearby or somehow interconnected with European countries. But again, it depends. I just really encourage the person, who asked the question, or anybody else who's interested, to get in touch with your specific details, and we can help get more precise answers to that.
Great. And Hilda, do you have I see you nodding. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that's fully correct what Tanya mentioned. I just want to say that the service that we provide is a global service. So we also work through our subsidiary, for example, in the US. In this case, we specifically addressed European entities in the webinar, but for sure, as Tanya was mentioning, there's either financing routes that connect European countries with other countries, or in these other continents, there's specific grants or financing routes that are relevant for you. And as she mentioned, either the people from Space Commerce Matters or ourselves are happy to help you also dig into that if that can help you move on in your project.
Great. I see another question in the chat, which is, what are the private sector investors, and if they exist at all, or are most of these coming from governments, EU specific that is? I will take the first bite at that answer, just coming from my own experience. And this is probably more on the US side. So Hilda, you can please add your experience on the European side. But in terms of private sector investors, what we've found is a lot of the big Fortune 500 type companies have big internal both sustainability programs as well as STEM education programs. So we were able to tap into some of this large corporate funding where they allocate dollars based on STEM education goals to fund some of the activity that we did do in space. That's not necessarily an easy thing to do if you're coming at it as, a single individual. So if that is of interest, again, as we've been saying, we're happy to talk to you offline about what that could look like vis-a-vis, your existing work or your existing program. And Hilda, do you have a point to add to that or a perspective?
No, I think you covered it. I think what we see is that, there is interest from private investors, but maybe not necessarily so much related to educational projects, but more in the sense of applied R&D activities. There, we do some areas where there's interest of investment to be made also in Europe. But yeah, for educational projects, I must say I have not seen that much other than in the form of sponsorships. Yes, and that's definitely also good to look into, because I think a lot of companies are actually interested to have their logo flown in space and to have a story to tell that relates to space. And so if that can be your project where you put a logo of a sponsor, that's a good way to fly your projects to space, I think.
Actually, absolutely. All right, so we're still asking you. I know that we sort of timed this to be a 45-minute event. We have a couple more minutes if people want to hang on. We do have another question, and Hilda, this is for you. Could you share a little bit more about the KID project, the electronic board throwing ball thing on the ISS? How does it work, and what exactly does the student work on, and what does the student learn?
Yeah, so in this case, in fact, I put the video, but for the sake of time, I will not show the video. Please do look it up because I do think it's a lot of fun. I mean, these were primary kids, primary kids, that sounds funny, primary school kids. So it's obviously, I mean, their idea is at the level of their age, but I really loved it because they actually did the coding themselves. So if you ask what they worked on and what they learned, so they actually did the coding for these mini Calliope themselves. They came up with the concept of the ball and of the target and so on. So they have basically been going in a quite rapid and you could say simplified way through the process of a payload design and the concept setup and the coding associated with it. So I think they did quite a lot actually for their age. I was truly impressed.
Great. After the funding acquisition, how long will it take sending the samples to the ISS? For example, crystallization ice cube, and more technical question, how many protein samples can be loaded into one cube? I'd appreciate it if you could share the link. Excellent question.
Excellent question indeed. So it really depends on the complexity of what you want to fly, how much time it takes. What we say is that we have now reached the point where it's actually the development of what you need to fly that is defining the time it takes. So if you want to develop something truly complex, it can take maybe 18 months. If you're flying something over not too complex, it's new, then probably it will take something like a year. But if, for example, and let me share it again, because you refer specifically to the protein crystals, for example, here we are flying this incubator that has flown already before in space. So we don't need to go through the full certification and safety process. And then you can actually define your samples much later. So in fact, the one for the Kirara mission, we can define up to 6, even 5 months or even 4 months before a launch. We do think if it's for educational purposes that it's of course better to start early on so that you have the educational program that comes with it and you can test these conditions on the ground and so on. But the real definition of the samples, if you're flying hardware that has already flown before, can be really up to only months before an actual space launch.
I have to say this crystallization work that Ice Cubes is doing with Carrera is really exceptional, and I think adds quite a bit of, I don't know, flexibility to the work that you might be thinking about terrestrially. So please do reach out on this. It's a really exciting opportunity.
And I don't know if I can throw things in the chat or if I don't know if you saw what I threw in as an example of a request for ID for the check, but if I cannot, then maybe I can ask Leonardo to also put the link for the Kirara website where there is like the user manual and so on, because that might also help for the person who was asking the question to find a bit more on how it goes and so on.
Perfect. So yeah, Leonardo, if you could do that, that would be great. And we will make sure that we have recorded this session. We will send out the PowerPoints or the links to the PowerPoints as well as to the links that Leonardo and Hilda have now referred to. And then we'll be doing that in the next couple of days. Again, as we've been reiterating, you may have very specific questions and want to follow up on any of these items. Hilda, the Ice Cubes team, as well as the SCM team are happy to follow up with you and answer any of your questions. So I think that is about it. We'd really like to thank you for attending. And yeah, I'm inspired, Hilda. I can't wait to go back to work and and think about all of these exciting opportunities for the rest of today and beyond. So again, thanks for everyone for joining us. Thanks so much to Hilda for such an incredible presentation, and we'll be in touch soon. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for organizing, and thank you for the participants. And I just want to mention before we close, so Leonardo, my colleague, is also on there. He has been supporting many projects in space. So please, you can also use him to pick his brain on any of the questions you might still have after this. So don't hesitate to reach out to either Space Commerce Matters or ourselves with any questions. And thank you also from my side to participate.